Divinity 2, Ego Draconis, is a sequel to Divine Divinity. It was developed by Larian Studios and uses the Game Brio engine, which is the same engine used in games such as Oblivion and Fallout 3. An expansion for both the Windows and Xbox 360 titled Flames of Vengeance was released in 2010. The game I'm reviewing right now is the remastered version called Divinity 2, the Dragon Knight Saga, whichever you want to pronounce it, and it featured new content and an improved engine. The gameplay can be simply described as dull. Nothing in particular stands out, except maybe the dragon sections, but the extremely simple yet unbalanced combat becomes repetitive and boring quickly. You'll end up breezing through certain sections of the game and end up having a great deal of annoying pain as ridiculous battles come one after another. Quests are mostly garbage except for a few that spark a bit of interest, and some can get a bit tricky, so you might need some help online. The quest helper can be troublesome at times, since some quests provide little to no help on what the objective is. Even reading all of the dialogue does not help for some quests. So what do you guys think of the gameplay? Connor?
I played with the first 5 minutes, so what I believe in the gameplay, again, first 5 minutes, pretty much kind of what you said, but then again you have to remember not every game is going to give you like a little trail like Fable where you just follow the yellow brick road or golden little speckle dust. They're going to expect you to use your brain or just maybe look it up for all you know.
I like
just
golden
figure it
speckle
out.
dust.
Well, that's you, Steven, but not everyone. I played Dark Souls. They only tell you two things. You gotta ring these bells. Figure it out from there. It could be a little one, a big one. You don't know. You don't know what the hell you're looking for, and it's not always going to be obvious. It's going to be difficult sometimes.
So that's for the quests?
That's for the quests.
Referring to that?
Yeah.
What about you, Steven?
Well, the gameplay in general, like swords and bows, same freaking animations are constantly throughout the whole game. Ridiculous. Boring. It reminds me of like playing Dragon Age 2 where every single sword swing is the exact same thing as the other one. Horrible.
And that is good.
That is not good.
And the gameplay does not change at all. It's very static. What you play in the first 5 minutes will be the same exact thing as the last 5 minutes of the game. For the good, I did enjoy the good amount of abilities and skills there were to choose from. There are around 4 different skill trees for different playstyles, but the option to mix in and make hybrids was allowed, so that's a good thing. Some abilities were completely useless though, a problem many RPGs tend to have, so this is okay. It's not that bad. I mean, it's very common, but it's nothing to take note of.
Divinity 2's plot is average at best, offering some character development here and there for the protagonist and antagonist. The story doesn't compare to epic journeys such as Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, but it does offer a decent amount of background info to accompany the different regions and factions of the game. So the game throws you into the world of Divinity 2 and starts you off as an initiate to a group known as the Dragon Slayers, or for short, Slayers. Obviously the name hints at what they do, and they are easily distinguished by their stylish silver eyes, which is one of the features you get early in the game, aside from being able to read minds.
So the prologue of the game gives the player a perspective of the life of a Slayer, who eventually, after a few main quests, ends up becoming, spoiler alert, what he/she hunts, a Dragon Knight. End of spoilers. Skip forward a few quests and a handful of hours. The player ends up being able to morph into a dragon, which is when the game sort of opens up. Everything after that is just a buttload of side quests and main quests, which brings the player closer towards the antagonist, Damien. If the player hasn't tired themselves to death from the generic gameplay, then the player reaches the point in the game where these so-called sky fortresses are pulled out of the developer's ass and thrown at the protagonist every remaining minute and second of the game. Cue a couple of mini-bosses and the final boss for Ego Draconis, the first 3/4 of the game. The game proceeds to Flames of Vengeance, an add-on that should have been part of the main game, and concludes the story of Divinity 2. It provides more content, a mass amount of quests, and a true ending to the game.
The graphics for Divinity 2 were sort of a mixed bag. While the textures and renderings had no problems, the animations were the Achilles heel for the game. They were choppy and just generally not very good. They did not really match the visuals that were actually quite very good. While the game may be a few years old, the visuals are actually quite nice.
One thing I noticed about the cinematics for this game was they're really impressive. They really were. I was hoping to see much better quality in things in this game because of the cinematics. But overall, it was a letdown, sadly. But the cinematics were definitely one of the most things that shined in the game.
Another aspect of Divinity 2 is the sound. The soundtrack for the game can be quite nice and enjoyable sometimes, but some of the soundtrack can be quite irritating, so you may just want to play your own music if you really don't like it, because the combat really has the same tune over and over and over, so it may get irritating. I played my own music and so does my friend. Another thing about it is the voice acting. The game has pretty on par voice acting for it. It may not be the best voice acting, but it's much better than most RPGs of its time. But one problem is that the animations kind of pretty much kill it. Since they don't really they're not really synced together properly, it seems kind of weird or just not right most of the time. Well, I'm going to hand this over to my friend who has also something to say.
Hey guys, about the soundtrack, to be honest, when I first started, I extremely hated it. I could not stand it whatsoever. And I don't know, like over time, I just started to like it better for some reason. Like I could tolerate it. And I was like, wow, this is not that bad as I thought. But either the first songs that play in the game were either crappier than the ones that played later in the game. At least that's what I thought. But I went back and listened to it, and I was like, hey, isn't that bad? So the soundtrack, it's you either hate it or love it, I guess. And maybe if you play the game too much, you'll start to go crazy about it. So that's that. This is just an example of the voice acting in the game.
Here is the barbaric dragon who destroyed the majesty that is my fortress. Why? May Earthring's helmet protect me.
After taking everything said in the review into consideration, Divinity 2 has one major problem. It's lie about its replay value. It boasts it can play over 100 hours of game time, but really only averages to about 30 to 35 hours, 40 or maybe even 50 if you do absolutely everything. But the game, for an RPG, doesn't really affect how you play the game again when you play the game before. It's such little diversity in that, so it's really not the best replay value I've ever seen in a game. Sure, not every game is expected to be like all of this big epic fantasy that diverts from the other one if you play it just differently. It's just flat out doesn't change at all, really. And that's the major problem I have seen with it.
So one thing to take note of whenever talking about the length of this game is that the other aspects of the game affect the length, like gameplay and plot. When I was playing throughout the game, I was so bored by the gameplay, and the plot was just so dull. I just wanted to rush with the game, like rush to the end, just so I can finish it once and for all. So that might happen to you guys when you play it. That's what happened to me. That's all I'm saying. So overall, the game introduces a story that seemed promising at first, but later felt rushed and generic and contained a few plot holes that made the plot average at best. The gameplay could in fact be the worst aspect of this game, simply because it lacked dynamic content. The game does not change much at all and delivers poorly in terms of quality. Sure, it contained a pretty high amount of quests, but quality trumps quantity. The music is fairly written, but the soundtrack does contain some tracks I personally loathe. The voice acting is a mixed bag, since some characters had awful voices and others had more of a natural and acceptable tone. The length of the game varies due to how much one does and how fast one plays, but one should expect a playthrough to last longer than 30 hours for completionists. Finally, I found the game to be somewhat below average, and felt as if I spent more hours bored than interested. Still, for those who enjoy RPGs and have a high level of tolerance, this game won't wow you, but it could entertain for a while.